Hey all you cool cats and kittens. So I'm a little bit late to the game, but let's talk about Tiger King. I watched the series and I had a lot of opinions about it, and then I watched Kristen Leo's response, Cheap Lazy Vegan's response, and that vegan couple's podcast episode about it where they go into depth. And I gotta say, they pretty much shared my thoughts exactly. But not everyone who watches my videos is subscribed to these other channels, so I figured it'd be worth it to put out my own response, even though I'll be reiterating a lot of what has already been said. If you haven't seen Tiger King, don't even bother. It's entertaining, for sure, but it's honestly more triggering than it is enjoyable to watch. As a vegan, you're just gonna be pulling out your hair because of how little attention they actually put on the animals. Just to give a brief overview, Joe Exotic is a gay, polygamous tiger enthusiast who owns a roadside zoo in Oklahoma, and his arch nemesis is Carole Baskin, who's a quirky, eccentric animal rights advocate who runs a sanctuary in Florida called Big Cat Rescue. He ends up in jail for plotting to kill that bitch, Carole Baskin. The entire series is focused on Joe himself, so much so that people view him as some sort of hero. Cardi B tweeted, "About to start a GoFundMe for Joe, he shall be free." And they did Joe so dirty over and over again. And then when she was informed that GoFundMe doesn't allow fundraisers in defense of inmates convicted of violent crimes, she tweeted, "OMG, I was just playing. I do love him though, and he def needed better representation." And I've even seen people in my own Facebook feed who are joking about how Carole is just as bad as Joe, and how they want to purchase a tiger with their stimulus check. So yeah, this just goes to show how irresponsibly produced this docuseries was. Carole Baskin was pretty appalled by how the series turned out, and understandably so, because when the producers first approached her about it, they said they wanted to make a big cat version of Blackfish. It was definitely not that. You can read her response on Big Cat Rescue's website. She's now receiving a bunch of threats and harassment. Meanwhile, Joe is getting fan mail in prison. One of the biggest plot points in the series is that Carole's late husband went missing, and Joe capitalized on this and spread a bunch of rumors that Carole killed her husband and fed him to the tigers. Keep in mind that there's no evidence for this, but they just run with this narrative, and they really implicate her in the minds of the average viewer. Joe even made a music video called Here Kitty Kitty, where he hires this Carole Baskin lookalike, and she's suspiciously feeding meat to her tigers. There's a reason why people are comparing Joe to Donald Trump. He's just a master troll. The song is funny in the same way that Trump's tweets are funny. Like, you're laughing, but also crying. It would be humorous if they also fairly represented her side of the story, but they didn't. The case remains unsolved, and it's possible that Carole killed her husband, but are we just gonna take Joe's word? Are we really going to believe the wild accusations of a narcissistic animal abuser? Apparently, because hashtag Team Joe is trending on Twitter. Another outrageous narrative that this series spun is that there's no meaningful difference between zoos and sanctuaries. The way they portrayed Big Cat Rescue was incredibly disingenuous. What's the difference? They both have cats in cages. I can't believe I have to spell out the major differences here. First of all, Big Cat Rescue is an accredited sanctuary, which means they rescue cats from abusive environments like roadside zoos, and they provide as comfortable a home as possible for them to live out the rest of their lives, as they can't just release them back into the wild. For many reasons, like these animals are raised and bred in captivity, so they lack survival skills, and they're often declawed, so that would limit their ability to hunt. And there's also no wild for them to return to. The reason tigers are an endangered species is because we've destroyed their natural habitat. There's an argument to be made that perhaps euthanizing these tigers would be best because you can't really adequately recreate their natural environment. And these are carnivorous animals that require a shit ton of meat to survive. But regardless of which side of that debate you're on, it's undeniable that what Carole Baskin is doing is leagues better than what Joe Exotic is doing. Yet, whether it was intentional or not, the series draws a very insidious false equivalence. Carol is advocating for the abolition of private ownership and the breeding of exotic animals, whereas Joe privately owns and breeds tons of tigers for profit. Big Cat Rescue does not breed cats, and they don't let visitors touch cats, whereas Joe makes hundreds of thousands of dollars touring around the country letting people take selfies with newborn tiger cubs. At one point, he brags to a crowd of people that the tiger cubs were only 1 hour old. What the fuck? He's later shown dragging a newborn cub away from their mother, who's still giving birth, with this long metal hook, and struggles to pull them out from under the fence. Then he complains that the screaming cubs, which he stole from their mother, won't shut up. So yeah, the show doesn't totally hide the animal abuse, but the overall narrative minimizes it to the point where it's basically forgotten. They spend more time discrediting Big Cat Rescue and villainizing Carol than they do showcasing the abuse of these poor animals. I'll let Rose explain.
So Joe is saying all this stuff about like, oh, Carol Baskin, she's doing the same thing as I am. She's also bringing in people. Why are you having all these visitors from around the world? And why do you allow them to go and step foot inside your sanctuary and blah, 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 blah. What is the difference between what you're doing and what I'm doing? I'm also making money. You're also making money. There is no difference. And then, of course, they show the footage of Carol Baskin at Big Cat Sanctuary, and there's like this giant lineup of people ready to visit, and Carol Baskin is like taking a video of them and telling them to hashtag Big Cat Rescue and all that stuff. Now, they conveniently forgot to mention that that event that they filmed was a once-in-a-year event, which is also a fundraiser. So very dishonest, I would say. So yes, they do have visitors, but apparently they go in small groups, and of course, they do not touch the tigers. They are not allowed to touch the tigers, and they don't have any sort of contact with the tigers whatsoever. They just, walk around the sanctuary. This is how sanctuaries work. So there's a big difference between a zoo, especially a petting zoo that allows, cup petting and, people to go and like touch the animals and take pictures with the animals, and a sanctuary that actually educates people on what happens to tigers that are being bred and live their lives in captivity. Huge difference, night and day, and they seem to basically ignore that difference. Second thing that they kept trying to push to the audience, I felt, was this idea that Carol Baskin is also making so much money from these big cats, and because she's making money, she's just as evil, she's just as bad as any of these for-profit zoos. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but nothing is free in this world. Nothing is free. Things cost money. Whether it's a sanctuary or a zoo, things will cost money, and money needs to be made in order to maintain something like a sanctuary or a zoo. Yes, she needs to make money. Surprise! She's running a sanctuary of tigers. I imagine they are not very cheap to take care of and to feed, and she clearly has a big piece of land that again needs to be maintained, and also of course she needs to probably raise money for the advocacy that she's doing. They do need to make money. They both need to make money, but it's what's been done with the money that makes a big difference. Joe Exotic is feeding his animals expired Walmart meat. Anyway. And clearly he's doing this for a profit. A sanctuary is a non-profit organization. There are differences between a for-profit organization and a non-profit organization. People seem to think that a non-profit should not be making any money. The purpose of a non-profit is not that they shouldn't make any money or bring in any money at all. It's that the money that they make goes back into the organization and the cause that it represents. Whereas in a for-profit organization, the money will go into the pockets of the owners, and it's more about the individual gain rather than any sort of cause.
She then goes on to explain that Joe flies over Big Cat Rescue in his helicopter and gets drone footage to expose her for her hypocrisy, and says that she claims to have 100 tigers, but he only saw 12 tigers. Like, where are all these cats? Implying that she's lying, or that we should be suspicious of all these missing cats. And then they show footage of all these overgrown weeds and foliage, suggesting that the sanctuary is just so unkempt. Like, no, Joe, she's trying to recreate their natural habitat. Just because they're out of sight doesn't mean they're not there. If anything, this should highlight the clear difference between the living conditions of these cats. But people are so freaking stupid that they just believe this insane narrative. I saw this meme on Facebook, and it's really sad that so many people fail to see the difference between caring for animals so that they can serve our interests and caring for animals so that we can serve their interests. Animals have their own interests, and they're not here for us to use. Big Cat Rescue takes tigers out of very shitty situations and puts them into a less shitty situation. If you were a tiger, would you rather live here or here? Throughout the show, they pit the animal people against the animal rights people, which is amusing because when most people think of an animal person, they envision someone who loves animals. But when they think of an animal rights person, they envision a militant, angry, radical extremist who wants to just suck the fun out of everything. But what does it mean to love an animal? Fascination is not love, in the same way that lust is not love. I think when we're young, we mistake lust for love, but we learn from experience that being infatuated with someone is not the same as being in love with someone. Unfortunately, some people never learn this and they remain emotionally immature, but that's besides the point. Joe loves tigers like Republicans love nature and womanizers love women. Conservatives will insist that they care about the environment, but wanting a litter-free beach so that you can enjoy your vacation and wanting to preserve national parks because they're aesthetically pleasing to you is not the same as actually fighting for environmental justice. And we all know men who claim to love women, but worshipping the female form and wanting a trophy wife is not the same as actually respecting women. This type of love is shallow, it's not genuine love. To truly love someone is to respect them. Throughout the show, Carol Baskin kind of unofficially represents PETA. She's quirky and imperfect and very easy to hate if you're not on board with her message. Rather than educate people on the plight of exotic animals in captivity, this show just exacerbates people's irrational hatred for PETA. Carol is no saint. To my knowledge, she's not vegan, so she is a hypocrite. But she's objectively better than Joe Exotic. Joe and all these other characters like Doc Antle, who basically runs a tiger-themed sex cult, have no room to talk about the living conditions at Big Cat Rescue. Oh, and I forgot to mention earlier that when they're exposed for exploiting not only the animals but their workers, they point the finger at Carol for not paying her volunteers. They're volunteers! They're happily donating their time to a charity. A huge difference! This finger pointing is so freaking typical. Vegans are hypocrites! PETA kills animals! First of all, PETA euthanizes cats and dogs that were rejected by no-kill shelters. They have limited resources. What are they supposed to do? Blame the breeders who created the problem, not the organization that's begging people to adopt, not shop. PETA is not a perfect organization, but if you're not vegan, you're very likely supporting animal cruelty on a daily basis. You are worse than PETA, so shut the fuck up. They also show footage of Carol back in the day, breeding kittens and bottle feeding them, as if this is a gotcha. What a hypocrite. She changed! She realized that what she was doing was wrong, so she stopped doing it. How is this bad? In the last episode, Joe is on trial for numerous crimes, and I forgot who it was that said this, but this dude was like, they got him on all these trumped up charges, referring to all the charges of animal cruelty that they added to the murder for hire charge. In case you didn't know, trumped up charges are fabricated to unfairly punish someone. The animals are such an afterthought to these people that they don't even see charges of animal abuse as legitimate. Anyways, there's so much I could say, but those are the main points that I wanted to address. I think the producers lack journalistic integrity, given that people came out of this empathizing with Joe, a manipulative, narcissistic, sexual predator and animal abuser, more than the animal victims. It's not that Joe deserves no pity for his rough childhood and struggles as a gay teen, but this doesn't excuse his behavior. People are saying that if this was a more serious expose that focused on the animals, then it wouldn't have gotten as much attention, which may be true. But I think they missed an opportunity to make a documentary that was both incredibly powerful and informative and entertaining. They could have shined a much brighter spotlight on the plight of these animals, with the humorous drama sprinkled in to engage people. I mean, the outrageousness of this story would have still drawn plenty of people in. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And hashtag Team Carol. Alright, peace.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me nah eat no fish, nah no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me nah eat no fish, nah no meat now.